You will call me Mr. Vale, the Duke of Velmont told his startled secretary in the carriage, and you will breathe not one word that I am anything more, or I will have your post and your pension both. Is that clear? And he stepped down at the Harringtons' house party as a plain gentleman of no particular consequence in a good but unremarkable coat, with his signet ring turned inward against his palm, because Cyprian Velmont had learned, in 35 years of being a duke, that he could trust no one's kindness while they knew his name, and there was one person in the world whose kindness he needed, just once, to see proven true. His brother was the reason. Theodore was 19 and gentle and easily frightened, a stammer, a shyness that left him mute and miserable in company, a tendency to flinch from raised voices, and the world, which had no patience for a duke's brother who was not brilliant and bold, had been cruel to him all his life. Their late father had been cruelest of all. Cyprian had stood guardian over the boy since he was 12, and had grown into a hard, watchful, suspicious man in the doing of it, because he had seen too many fortune hunters and false friends look at the shy boy, and see only the great Velmont name behind him, a name worth marrying into, a brother worth flattering for what the connection might bring. So when the matchmaking mothers of the season pressed their daughters at him, the Duke had conceived a colder test than any of them imagined. He had let it be known that Mr. Vale, a quiet cousin, would bring young Theodore to the Harringtons' country house party for the heir, and he had come to watch. To watch how the unsuspecting ladies, who did not know there was a dukedom in the room, treated a stammering, frightened boy of no apparent importance whatsoever. He expected to learn that their sweetness was a coin spent only where it paid. He expected, if he was honest, to despise them all and go home with his low opinion of the world confirmed. He did not expect Cassandra Fenn. She was a governess, companion rather, to the Harringtons' 2 younger daughters, a gentlewoman of no fortune earning her bread in another family's house, the sort of person the grand guests looked through as though she were a window. The Duke, looking through her himself at first, marked only that she was plainly dressed and quiet and stood at the edges of every room. Then, on the second evening, he saw what she did. Theodore had been cornered in the long gallery by a pair of the visiting young ladies, beautiful, sharp, bored, who had asked him some careless question, and then, when the poor boy's stammer locked his tongue and the silence stretched and his face went scarlet, had glanced at each other and laughed behind their fans and drifted away, leaving him standing wretched and alone with the laughter still hanging in the air. The Duke, watching from across the room, felt the old cold fury rise and started forward, and stopped, because someone had reached his brother first. It was the companion. She did not hurry, and she did not pet him, which would have been worse. She simply came and stood at his side as though she had meant to be there all along, and she said something low, and she did not seem to notice or mind that his answer came out broken and slow. She waited through the stammer with a perfect ease, as though there were all the time in the world, and a halting answer were the most natural thing she had ever heard. And by degrees the Duke watched his brother's scarlet fade, and his shoulders come down from around his ears, and, astonishingly, a small smile break over the boy's face, because Miss Fenn had said something dry and funny, and Theodore had managed to answer it, and she had laughed, not behind a fan, but openly and warmly, at his joke and not at him. The Duke stood very still across the gallery, his signet ring biting into his palm. He watched her after that as closely as he had ever watched anyone. He told himself it was vigilance, that she might yet prove false, that no one was that kind for nothing. He waited for the seam to show. It never did. She did not know Mr. Vale from any other dull gentleman. She had no notion that the shy boy she was gentle with had a dukedom standing behind him. There was nothing in it for her at all, and she went on day after day, simply being kind. She found Theodore a quiet corner of the library where the loud guests did not go. She drew him out about the birds he loved, and listened, through every stammer, as though his halting words on the nesting of swallows were the most fascinating matter in England. When a tipsy young lord mocked the boy's stutter at dinner, It was the companion, risking her place, for a companion could be turned off for far less, who said, clear and cool down the table, that she had always thought a man who took care with his words worth 10 who spilled them carelessly, and let the silence land where it belonged on the Lord. There was an afternoon he would carry with him always. A sudden summer storm had broken over the house, and the thunder had come down hard and close, and Theodore, who had a horror of thunder that went back to some cruelty of their father's, a locked room, a punishment, the details of which the boy had never been able to speak, had gone white and rigid in the drawing-room, his hands shaking, the stammer choking him, so that he could not even excuse himself to flee. The grand guests had not so much as glanced his way. But the Duke, frozen in his disguise across the room, had seen the companion cross to his brother at the first crash thunder, quick and quiet, and take the boy gently by the elbow, and lead him out, not with pity, not with fuss, but as a friend leads a friend who is merely tired of a dull party. He had followed unseen, and found them in a small side room, and heard Miss Fenn talking low and steady through the worst of the storm, not soothing nonsense, but telling Theodore some long, ridiculous story about a parrot her grandfather had owned that swore in 3 languages, until the boy, in spite of everything, in spite of the thunder still rolling overhead, begun to laugh helplessly, his terror dissolved in it. She had got him through the storm not by treating him as broken, but by treating him as a person worth making laugh, and the Duke had stood in the doorway unseen, with his throat tight, and known that he was lost. And the Duke of Velmont, who had come to that house to have his contempt for the world confirmed, found his hard heart turning over in his chest like a key in a long rusted lock. It was not only that she was kind to Theodore, though that alone would have undone him, for nothing on this earth reached Cyprian Velmont like gentleness to his brother. It was that she was kind when there was nothing to be gained by it, kind to a nobody, kind in the small, unwatched moments when she did not know a soul was looking. He, who had spent his life unable to tell true coin from false, watched a poor governess spend her sweetness freely on a boy the world had thrown away, and he understood, with a force that frightened him, that he had found the one genuine thing he had despaired of ever finding. There was a particular evening in the library that he turned over often afterward. They had fallen to talking, Mr. Vale and the companion, 2 people of no consequence, easy together in the lamplight while the grand party made its noise in the rooms beyond, and she had spoken, more freely than she perhaps meant to, of her own life. She had been gently born, she told him, and well educated, until her father's death had left her with nothing but her education and her good name, and she had gone out to earn her bread teaching other women's children and minding other women's houses. She did not complain of it. She said only, with a small wry honesty that went straight through him, that the hardest part of being a poor gentlewoman was not the work nor the want, but the invisibility, the way the great people looked through you as through a pane of glass, the way you learned to expect nothing for yourself, and to find your small joys in the happiness of those you served. "It is why I cannot bear to see your young cousin slighted," she said. "I know how it feels to stand in a bright room and be seen by no one. He at least has you, Mr. Vale, to stand by him. I should not like to think of him standing alone." And the Duke, who had concealed his name precisely so that no one would stand by him for the wrong reasons, sat in the lamplight beside a woman who knew nothing of his name and stood by his brother for the only right one, and felt the loss of his guard go down. He fell in love with her over a fortnight, as Mr. Vale, and she had no idea, and that, he would think later, was the sweetest part of all, that she came to like the plain, quiet gentleman for himself, lingering with him in the library doorway, over a shared concern for the shy boy they both watched over, easy with him in a way she could never have been with a duke. He found he could not bear to end it. He let the days run on. He was happier in his borrowed plain coat than the Duke of Velmont had been in 20 years. It ended as such things must by accident. The Harringtons' butler, an old man who had served at Velmont in his youth, came upon Mr. Vale in the hall one morning, peered at him, went white, and bowed nearly to the floor. "Your Grace," the old man breathed. "Forgive me, I did not, Your Grace, the Duke of Velmont here, and no one told below stairs." And Cassandra Fenn, coming down the stairs with the younger girl's work baskets in her arms, stopped on the bottom step and went very still. The Duke turned. He saw her face change, saw the warmth in it freeze over with something he had not foreseen and could not bear, not awe, but hurt. She set the baskets down with great care. "Your Grace," she said, and curtsied, low and correct, and it was the correctness that cut him, the careful retreat of it. "I did not know. I have spoken to you these 2 weeks as I would speak to any gentleman. If I have been too free, or said anything unbecoming to your rank, I beg your pardon, and I will keep from your way for the rest of your visit. Miss Fenn." "You were watching us," she said low, and now the hurt had an edge to it. "You hid your name to watch how I treated your brother, to test us." Her chin came up. I passed, Your Grace. I had not known I was being examined. I should have been just the same had I known I was not." "That," said the Duke, "is precisely the point." She looked at him. "I have spent my life," Cyprian said, and his voice was not the cold, even voice she had heard him use in company. It shook a little, and he let it, "watching people be sweet to my brother for the sake of my name, and false friends flatter a frightened boy because there is a dukedom behind him, and I could never once tell who was true. So yes, I hid the name, to see one person be kind to him when there was nothing in it. And I found you." He came toward her across the hall, and the old butler melted gratefully away, and the Duke of Velmont stood before a poor governess with his heart in his hands for the first time in his hard life. "You were gentle to a nobody. You defended him at the risk of your place. You did it when you thought no one of consequence was watching, which means you did it for him, and not for me and Miss Fenn. That is the only kind of kindness I have ever wished to deserve." He took her hand. She let him, though her eyes were bright and uncertain. "I did not lose my heart when the butler bowed just now," he said. "I lost it a fortnight ago, in the long gallery, when you stood beside my brother through a stammer as though you had all the time in the world. I lost it at once, and I have been losing it more every day since, as Mr. Vale, who was happier than the Duke has any right to be." He turned his hand, and the signet ring caught the morning light at last, no longer hidden. "I do not want a duchess who would have curtsied lower had she known my name. I want the woman who did not know it, and was kind anyway. I want you. Theodore wants you. He told me last night, in his halting way, that you are the first person outside our blood who has ever made him feel he need not be afraid. And so do I, Cassandra. So do I." The brightness in her eyes spilled over. "He is a good boy," she said unsteadily, "and a far cleverer one than the world allows. I know it. You are the only other soul who does. And you," she went on, half laughing now through the tears, "were a far easier gentleman to like as plain Mr. Vale, and I am not at all sure I forgive you for being a duke." "Then do not forgive the Duke," Cyprian said. "Marry Mr. Vale, who loved you in a borrowed coat, and let the Duke come alongly because he cannot be got rid of." And he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to it, ring and all, and from the gallery above came a small glad sound. Theodore, who had heard everything, and who for once in his shy life had found, without a single stammer, the courage to laugh out loud with joy. They were married before the leaves turned. The Duke of Velmont, who had trusted no one's kindness in 35 years, learned to trust hers completely, because she gave it to the least of his house first, and a man who is gentle to your frightened brother when she thinks you are no one at all is a woman whose heart you may rest in for the whole of your life. Theodore lived with them always, and grew, under her warm and patient care, into a man who could hold a room, and on the day the boy first stood, and spoke without faltering, it was his new sister he turned to first, and Cassandra Fenn, the governess a Duke had hidden his title to find, who held out her arms and welcomed him home.